The dining room exhaled when the last couple left their table and the door's soft hinge reclaimed them from the night. Someone flipped the sign to closed and the room's amber mood collapsed inward. All candle cups breathing out at once. In the kitchen the work light stayed on, a white bar drawn low over the pass, while the hood murmured at its gentlest setting. Steam drifted lazily from a stock pot keeping its own counsel, and the air held what the service had said all evening in different languages: brown butter. The sweetness of shallots going glassy. A thread of citrus from somebody's last-minute zest. The line, stripped of chits and hurry, looked like a stage after applause, clean, precise, a little unreal. I was at the banquette with my camera bag open and a laptop breathing warm onto my wrists. Scraping adjectives off a draft for the newsletter. Junior food writer is a job that means being useful at odd hours. I gathered tasting notes. Corrected menu spellings no one would admit to. And took photos when the real photographer had a wedding. I liked being around competence when it wasn't performing. A kitchen after closing feels like a cathedral cleaning its instruments. Elena came through the swing door without the gravity she wears on the pass. Service Elena is command in a white coat. Hair knotted with the geometry of discipline. Voice pitched to travel the length of a room without acquiring edge. After hours Elena is the same instrument at a lower volume. She unknotted her apron and whisked it over her head in one clean movement, leaving the coat underneath snow bright. Sleeves neatly turned. The pass bell made a soft, involuntary ring when her wrist brushed it, a reflex even the metal had learned to have around her. "You're still here," she said, not surprised, a dry half-smile editing the sentence into something gentler. She glanced at the screen. The open doc named late winter menu. How many ways are there to say velouté without sounding like we're apologizing for soup? 3, I said. 2 of them lies. She laughed once, quiet as a knife touching wood. The room liked the sound. Her son, my coworker in marketing, calls that laugh the truce. It's the one that says the worst is over. She set a Cambro on the pass, lifted the lid, breathed the steam like a person checking a weather report. "Stay a while?" she said without turning. "I need someone to taste the new menu. Tonight the kitchen is quiet. Your palate will be more honest." The invitation hung at the right altitude. Not a dare. Not a test. Simply a request from a person who had decided my mouth could keep a secret. I closed the laptop because some sentences can wait and some can't. "What do you need?" "Truth," she said, already walking toward the walk-in, hand pinging the door open. Cold washed over the hinge of night heat and made a small fog where the two argued. She moved through the shelves without looking. Inventory stored in muscle memory. A rack of bones perfuming tomorrow. Crates of greens like a tidy field. A tray of scallops laid out like moons. She came back with what she wanted, leek trimmings. A jar of something that had the gold of last summer trapped in it. A bundle of time bound like a small broom. Mise en place began the way a dance begins when the audience has gone home. She banged a pan down with affection, turned a knob, and the ring of flame unfurled as if relieved to be chosen. The knife tray flashed, steel kissed board. Shallots became confetti at a human tempo. A ladle dipped, rose, and the stock received its new instructions, sighing the way pots do when they forgive you for asking another hour from them. She didn't narrate. Elena is precise with words. She spends them like saffron. I fell into the counter rhythm of helping without getting in the way, fetching tasting spoons, sliding a clean towel where a hand would reach on instinct, resetting squeeze bottles to the left because her right hand was busy commanding heat. "You cook?" she asked, not because it mattered but because she collects useful data. "Enough to be humbled," I said, "enough to know the difference between heat and hurry." "Good," she said, and turned the pan just as butter went from sweet to nutty to almost something else. "Hurry is panic with a timer." The hood purred, a cat grown fond of a household. At the far end of the line a single pilot light kept its small blue promise. The room began to have only our noises in it, the polite lift of the pass bell when her wrist grazed it again. The disciplined hiss of shallots meeting hot fat. the dip and rise of a whisk asking a sauce to come to its senses. I watched her body practice its vocabulary, the left hand that always knows where the towel is, the right that says turn, the mouth that checks and approves the radius of a flame with less than a breath. "Why me?" I asked, careful to make curiosity a tool and not a complaint. "You don't perform your taste," she said. "You don't use clever words to cover a lack of attention. And you don't pretend familiarity with things you only met tonight." She slid a spoon across the pass, a small river of gold riding it. "Also, you're here. Presence is a skill." I let the spoon tell me its story. Velouté is a word that can be pompous if handled poorly. This one tasted like restraint done right. It warmed the mouth without shouting butter. It held the green of leek without being grass. And somewhere in there the stock's patient bones did their work without asking for credit. "You fixed the part where last week it went thin on the back," I said. "This finishes." She nodded once. "Data received." "Good. Next." The walk-in door breathed again. A new arrangement of small bowls found the pass, pickled fennel-like punctuation. Something crisp I couldn't name yet. A ramekin of crumbs the color of old bronze. Her hands wrote the choreography while heat read it back to her. And I felt the room drafting around us into a shape that allowed two people to think with their bodies at the same time. The longer we worked, the more the kitchen gave up its daylight austerity. Under the task lights the stainless wasn't cold. It was honest. Elena moved like a person who respects flame not because she fears it but because she's listened to it long enough to know when it lies. Her authority didn't press. It created space where competence could choose its best behavior. When the scallops hit the pan the sound had the confidence of rain on a roof that belongs to you. She didn't touch them until the pan told her it was time. When she did, the crust admitted its mahogany like a secret ready to be known. I plated while she finished the sauce. My hands careful with the geometry she prefers, odd numbers. Negative space treated kindly. Garnish as a sentence rather than a shout. She watched not to correct me but to see if I understood what the plate was trying to say about itself. We tasted. We adjusted. A squeeze here. A salt flake allowed to be seen. Service was over. Judgment wasn't. The room seemed to lean in, approving of the slower mathematics of after hours. Outside, the street said very little. Inside, the kitchen kept offering small truths. She set down her spoon and looked at me. Not past me, not through me, the way you look at a dish that is exactly itself. "Stay," she said, softer now, as if addressing the air as much as me. "We'll run 2 more courses. I want to hear the part you don't say out loud when an owner is listening." Her mouth found that truce of a laugh again. "No owner tonight." I felt the peculiar ease that comes from being useful without spectacle. I slid the laptop aside, shouldered the camera bag to the floor, rolled my sleeves as if that could make my palate more honest. She drew the task light down another inch, bringing us both into the same pool. "Tonight," she said, turning the knob so the flame answered with exactly the size she'd asked for. "Just us and the fire." The hood whispered like a metronome set to breathing. Elena slid a pot onto the smallest ring and let the flame find its proper radius before she spoke. "Course 1, she said, more to the room than to me. Velouté. Nothing to hide behind. She sweated leaks in butter until the kitchen's pulse synchronized with the sound, soft. Insistent. The quiet tap of hot fat negotiating with water. Stock went in with the grace of a promise. She didn't look at me when she reached for the salt. She looked at the pot as if it were a person prone to overreacting. We stood shoulder to shoulder without touching. Steam rose in fine threads and unspooled into the hood. The evening's unspoken things condensing and disappearing. She adjusted the heat the way careful people adjust sentences. "After the divorce," she said finally, tasting with the side of the spoon the way professionals do. "I kept cooking for 2. Habit and hope have the same wrist motion. It took months to retrain the hand that measures." She set the spoon down, handle toward me, and watched the surface settle. A fully equipped kitchen can still be missing a person. I didn't offer a condolence that would pat her on the back and move the story along. I watched the velouté come to itself. No boil. Just a shiver that said the starch understood its assignment, and let the smell give me words honestly. It tastes like restraint that doesn't apologize, I said, warm without bragging about butter. You fixed the finish. She nodded once. Data logged. She ladled a small pour into a warm bowl and slid it over. The white ceramic made the green truer, a color that meant winter had not won. We tasted without ceremony, spoons moving in unison. The hood hummed, a secular prayer. Service saves me, she said, rinsing the spoon and setting it upside down on a clean towel. Until it doesn't, the noise is good company. Then everyone goes home and the sound turns to echo. People want to know what I do for myself. I do me's. It's the only ritual that answers. The gentle laugh was an exhale that didn't commit to being a laugh. It makes a room tell me where everything belongs. Order is a kindness, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Some days I live like a list in good shoes. Deadlines, invoices, a gym check-in so my phone won't tattle. I hit the adult marks and then realize I haven't had a single thought that wasn't about being reliable. There isn't much air in that kind of competence. She lifted the pot off the heat and let it rest on a cool ring. The gesture neat as punctuation. Air comes from knowing which burners you can turn off, she said, not how many you can keep going. She moved to the fish station, wiped the steel until it looked like it would forgive a mistake, and set a pan to preheat. Course 2, she said, no sauces to hide behind. Scallop, hot pan, 2 minutes to tell the truth. She patted the scallops dry like a small act of mercy, salted them with a wrist that wasn't showing off, and waited. The pan told her when it was ready the way good metal does, silence turning to a dry, confident radiance. When she laid the scallops in, the sound was a rush of brown butter's heartbeat ticking into the room. We both breathed it in because there's no reason to pretend that sound isn't part of why people cook. She didn't touch them until the pan said yes. If a sauce breaks, she asked, eyes on the edge where brown met gold, what do you do? Lower the heat, I said. Find the emulsion again. Add what's needed slowly and stop trying to impress it. Don't whisk like you're angry. You'll scare it. Good, she said, flipping the scallops with a small lift that didn't bruise them. And when pressure climbs, make space, I answered. Create distance between heat and panic. Pull the pan off if you must. Let the heat do its part instead of proving you're stronger than physics. She gave me a glance that put a check mark next to something in her invisible notebook. A knuckle of butter went into baste. The spoon tilting, the fat going noisier for a moment and then settling as if it had found its reason. I watched her wrists do the choreography of care, tilt, baste, listen, nothing extra, nothing meant for an audience we didn't have. I confessed without dramatics, because the kitchen didn't allow for any. I am exactly the kind of adult a form would approve. I said, rent on time, servers tipped above the line, fruit in the fridge like an apology to my future self. But most weeks I realize my days are full and my life is packed, not inhabited. She turned off the flame and let the pan's remaining heat finish the browning, trusting carryover because good cooks know when to get out of the way. Service will take whatever room you give it and then ask for your pillow. She said, sometimes I give it mine. The trick is to notice which nights are worth the cost. Steam from the velouté pot moved through the light in slow ribbons. A visible measure of what wasn't being said. She slid the scallops onto warm plates, dressed them with thin coins of something bright and pickled, and handed me a fork. The crust cracked with the smallest sound, like a secret being careful with itself. And the center finished the sentence the pan had begun. Honest, I said, not shy, not a show-off. Like you, she said, not as flirtation, exactly, but as a finding. She drained the pan, wiped, and set it aside, the line ready if morning arrived early. We stood with our plates at the pass, eating like cooks do, standing, salt nearer than napkins, attention moving between mouth and station. The kitchen had shed its last outside voice. Only the brown butter pulse and the small squeaks of steel cooling remained. The walk-in door sighed once as if remembering us. She set her fork down, braced both hands on the steel, and looked at me with the calm of someone who could say nothing and still be heard. "If I invite you, it's because I trust your palate," she said, and then, after a beat that let the steam write its cursive in the air. "And you're calm." "I thought this was about the menu," I said. "It isn't, not only." The words were plain, which made impossible. She accepted that without triumph. "We're not children," she said, "and we're not rude to the people who would be hurt by our carelessness." She didn't have to say her son's name for him to stand there a moment between us. An honest presence in a room that had asked for honesty first. The velouté went quiet. The scallop plates were half empty. Appetite becoming attention. Elena reached into a drawer I hadn't noticed, pulled out 2 tasting spoons wrapped in a clean linen, and placed them on the pass between us, one toward me, one toward her, handles parallel, bowls shining like small moons. "We taste," she said, and her voice lost its command without losing any authority. She slid the second spoon into the space beside mine until their rims almost touched. "We tell the truth." The kitchen dimmed itself the way a body settles once the story it was telling is over. She drew the task light down until the cone of white made a small, deliberate stage over the pass. Most switches were off. One burner stayed lit at its lowest, a blue bead of breath holding the room in a steady key. The hood, set to a whisper, promised not to drown small truths. Elena placed a saucepan in that small, living circle and let the flame lick the steel until the pan's color told her it was ready to listen. She moved like someone who has negotiated with heat often enough to recognize its moods. I stood opposite, sleeves rolled, palms resting on the cool edge of the pass, there to help, there to witness. Between us, the tasting spoons waited, bowls forward like 2 moths unafraid of light. She tipped in a reduction, wine and stock and the last of a shallot's patience, and the air found a higher note. We leaned over the pan at the same time, drawn by the way a sauce announces the minute it decides to become itself. Our shoulders did not touch. Our breath shared the same small weather. "Don't jerk," she said, when my hand twitched toward the whisk. She set 2 fingers, light as instruction, against my wrist and rearranged my grip a few degrees. "Let your hand say less." The contact was not possession. It was craft passing through skin. I felt the correction travel farther than the hand. My chest recognized the instruction as if it had been waiting for an adult syntax. I slowed. The whisk made a smaller ellipse, the kind that promises to coax rather than convince. Steam wrote cursive between our faces and was gently stolen by the hood. "I told you I trusted your palate," she said, still watching the surface. "And you're calm." The words were not a reprise. They were a check to see if the first truth had held under heat. "I thought this was about the menu," I answered without the protection of a smile. It wasn't, not only. Saying it didn't break anything. It finished a line we had both been writing with our choices. She lifted the pan a fraction, let gravity thicken what flame had begun, and set it back. "We name it and we don't rush it," she said. "That's the difference between hunger and care." Her fingers left my wrist and took up the spoon, shoulders loosening the way they do when someone decides that letting a thing happen is safer than making it happen. The room narrowed to the radius of the saucepan and the distance between our eyes. Outside, the street was a hum with no need to rise. Inside, the only loudness was the occasional pop of a bubble betraying a seed of mustard we had decided to keep whole. She slid the spoon to me and I tasted, not only for salt and acid, but for the feeling of a decision landing in the mouth. "It's ready to be quiet," I said. "Good," she said, "so are we." She turned the knob down until the flame became a suggestion and reached behind to shut the other pilot. The kitchen was a heart with one valve open, steady and intentional. We acknowledged the third person in the room without speaking his name. Her son, the colleague who had introduced us to the same payroll and different kinds of competence, stood in that gentle blue with us as an obligation, not a threat. We put our terms into the air, the way cooks call orders to keep them true. We would not use work as a pretext. We would not trade favors inside invoices. We would not let anyone else pay the price for our clarity. If there was a cost, we would settle it ourselves and in full. No touching, not yet, only the discipline of proximity. She set both hands on the pass. Fingers straight, and I mirrored her. Steel under palm, pulse under skin. 2 lines drawn close enough to share heat without stealing it. Our breathing found the same measure. It is a strange relief to be near someone you don't have to hurry for. Some nights the kitchen needs noise, she said, eyes on our 2 spoons. Now parallel. Tonight it needs accuracy. To the gram, I said, and she almost smiled. The almost was a kind of consent. She reached for the small copper pan she saves for teaching and poured a ladle of the reduction in. Then added a thumb of brandy with the caution of a person who respects fire as a language. Not a toy. She tipped the pan away from the flame and welcomed it back. The ignition was clean, a column of light that showed us both to ourselves for 2 brief beats before settling into a disciplined burn. The blue of the standing flame caught in her eyes. The gold ran along the spoon like a narrow rivulet from inside. We watched together, saying nothing because words would have been garnish. When the flame went out it didn't feel like loss. It felt like decision obeyed. She whisked in a small piece of cold butter the way you end an argument with grace. And the sauce shined with the honesty of an emulsion held by trust rather than force. Your colleague, I said, letting the noun do the respectful work of his name, is my friend. He deserves a world that doesn't have to guess. He does, she said, which is why we don't guess either. We choose. She slid the pan to the cool side. Hands settling on the counter again. Flat and calm. We meet when the work allows. We don't invent emergencies. We keep the kitchen and the story clean. I can live inside that, I said. The truth of it tugged something low in me into place. Like a bench that stops wobbling when you find the right shim. The burner held its tiny bead of breath. The hood kept its vow. We stood with our hands parallel, letting agreement calibrate the air. In the glass of the pass, a reflection doubled us, 2 figures at a pool of light. Each outlined by a single flame that belonged to the room but seemed, for the moment, to belong to us. She broke the stillness with the smallest return to craft. Taste again, she said, and when our spoons lifted at the same time, the motion felt like signing something in duplicate. The sauce landed on the tongue with the clarity of a sentence that had been worked until every extra word was trimmed. We both nodded. The nods matched. She killed the flame at last. The kitchen accepted the dark behind the cone without drama. Our eyes adjusted to the softer world. The night came to stand closer. Elena wrapped the copper's handle in a towel and set it aside like a promise she meant to keep. Some heat is for cooking, she said, voice low, final without being closed. She looked at me in a way that didn't mistake my attention for permission and didn't need to. Some heat is for choosing. Elena shut the gas with a turn that felt like punctuation, not retreat. The cone of light over the pass stayed, but the room behind it loosened. Shadows re-inheriting corners. She stripped the side towel from her hip, folded it into a smaller square, and set it beside the copper with the same care she gives a blade when it has done its work. Order chits, the last thin flags of a finished night, came down from the pin in one motion. She folded them once, twice, and dropped them into the bin. The sound was barely anything, and still it read as closure. No one needs to know about test menus, she said. The sentence wasn't hedged. It carried the quiet of something tended rather than hidden. Privacy isn't hiding, I answered, surprised at how ready the line was in my mouth. It's how we plate this. Clean. No garnish we don't need. The metaphor didn't wobble under its own weight. In this room, it had a right to live. We named the rules like ingredients, one at a time, and didn't pretend they were ornamental. We go slow. We do not schedule against anyone who would have to guess why. We respect your son, my colleague, as a fixed point. He does not become collateral to our clarity. Work stays work. No comps that become currency. No invoices that carry more than they declare. We meet only when the calendar doesn't have to bend into shapes it cannot hold. If cost appears, we pay it ourselves and in full. Elena listened as if inventorying a walk-in. Head angled, eyes clear. Agreement, for her, is physical. You can see the shoulders settle when the terms fit. And we keep the kitchen clean, she added, and I understood she meant more than steel. We don't let the heat make decisions better suited to a cooler hour. I can live inside that, I said. The room took the line the way stock takes new flavor when it's been asked politely. Closing the kitchen is its own liturgy. She wiped the pass in long, even strokes, then the stations in the order the night had used them, letting each surface return to its default truth. Squeeze bottles nested by color, spoons aligned like instruments that knew their case. She lifted the hood's toggle a notch lower and the air softened. The hush shifting from workplace to place. I gathered the tasting spoons, rinsed, dried, and wrapped them back in linen, leaving enough space in the fold that the metal could cool its memory. We spoke less now because finishing has a grammar of its own. And talking over it feels like disrespect. In the dining room, the last candle glass wore a ring of smoke like a collar. Chairs stood on tables in the practical afterlife of service. We walked through the aisle with the distance of two people who know that public rooms have long memories and curious eyes. The ceiling camera slid idly along its track, a polite surveillance that made the world feel wider than we were. We let it read nothing from us. Our hands found their pockets on the same beat. At the host stand she collected the reservation book even though the system lives in a screen now. Habit likes paper. She flipped it closed, elastic band thwacking into place, and set it under the counter where it has always slept. Text me when you're home, she said, the sentence pared down to function. Her voice wasn't asking for proof. It was inviting a thread to be kept alive. I will, I said, and if you need a second set of eyes on copy tomorrow, send it. I'll edit before I show off. A small offering, scaled to the room. She locked the front door while I watched the city draft itself back into us through the glass. Outside, the sidewalk took its time remembering it belonged to no one. A taxi slid past without choosing us. Somewhere an ice machine gossiped to the night. We split at the curb the way two late staffers always do, one left to the bus stop that never arrives in a hurry. One right toward the parking lot with the one stubborn light. Our pace was ordinary on purpose. The camera above the awning watched and got nothing it could sell. The car received me with the faint upholstery sigh of a thing that forgives. I drove home without music, letting the air carry its own arrangement. At lights, I could feel the kitchen still on my skin, the even weight of the pass under my palms. The echo of her fingers nudging my wrist into a steadier grip. The knowledge that we had not used the room for something it wasn't built to hold. Steadiness is its own intoxication when you've been practicing it alone. At my apartment the lock turned without comment. I set the tasting notes beside the sink because the kitchen is where truth belongs. The phone, face down on the counter, felt less like a device and more like a promise to be deliberate. I texted, "Home, thank you for the work. Good night." Her reply came in the spare syntax we had been speaking all evening. Good sleep. The words left space for breath. Days kept their shape, which felt like respect for what we decided instead of distance from it. I edited a press release without inflating it. Photographed a staff meal that looked warmer than the menu would ever confess. And answered emails in plain language. When I passed the restaurant from the other side of the street, I didn't look in, not restrained. Fidelity to the choice to let rooms be what they are at certain hours. On the third afternoon my phone buzzed with the gravity I now associated with her. Test kitchen. Sunday 10 p.m. I have a source that needs your honesty. The message wore its camouflage in public and its invitation in private. It gave a time that respected both schedules and a task just specific enough to carry more than itself. I read it twice, once for logistics, once for what it promised, and answered in the same dialect. Yes, I can be there at 10. I added nothing I wouldn't want overheard by the world and everything I meant beneath it. I washed a plate by hand while the kettle thought about boiling and felt the small click inside. That means alignment. Not luck. The camera in my head, always a little busy when I care, quieted to a single focus. I was not rehearsing, I was readying. This time, I knew I wasn't only there to taste food.